President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, who has railed against social distancing measures and repeatedly downplayed the threat of coronavirus as the epidemic in his country became the second worst in the world, said Tuesday that he too had been infected. Critics at home and abroad have called Mr. Bolsonaro's handling of the pandemic cavalier and reckless, allowing the virus to surge across Brazil, Latin America's largest nation. At one point, he dismissed it as a measly cold, and when asked in late April about the rising death toll, he replied, "So what? Sorry, but what do you want me to do?" As the caseload has skyrocketed, Mr. Bolsonaro had shunned masks, attended mass rallies of his supporters, insisted that the virus poses no threat to healthy people, championed unproven remedies, and shuffled through health ministries who disagrees with him. Brazil has no more than 1.6 million confirmed cases and more than 65,000 deaths, more than any country except the United States. Mr. Bolsonaro fell ill 2 days after he and a handful of his ministers attended a 4th of July luncheon at the residence of Todd Chapman, the American ambassador in Brazil. Mr. Bolsonaro and other attendees sat shoulder to shoulder, embracing with no mask. The ambassador and his wife have since tested negative for the virus but will remain at home in quarantine, the embassy said. Speaking to journalists outside the presidential palace in Brasilia shortly after noon on Tuesday, Mr. Bolsonaro said he had taken a test on Monday after experiencing fatigue, muscle pain, and a fever. He said he was feeling very well, which he credited to have taken hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malaria drug he has endorsed but which studies show does not ward off the virus. COVID-19 cases that become serious often take a turn over the worst about a week after symptoms emerge. Mr. Bolsonaro did not express contrition for his handling of the pandemic and doubled down on his assertion that the virus poses little risk to healthy people. He characterized the diagnosis as a predictable outcome of a leadership style that requires him to be among the people. After taking questions from journalists, Mr. Bolsonaro stepped back a few feet, removed the mask he has been wearing, and smiled. Even as several of Mr. Bolsonaro's aides have tested positive for the virus in recent months, the president has often skewed precautions, boasting of how athletic background would protect him and encouraging his supporters to float lockdown measures imposed by city and state officials. Prime Minister Boris Johnson of Britain also rebuffed social distancing advice and resisted lockdown measures, though he was never as dismissive as Mr. Bolsonaro. But after he became seriously ill with COVID-19 and spent several days in hospital, he appeared to take the danger more seriously and made a point of praising overburdened healthcare workers. Mr. Bolsonaro's management of the virus has deeply divided his country, with many opponents expressing their rage at his heedless approach by banging pots and pans at their windows in the evenings. As Brazilians awaited the results of the president's latest coronavirus tests, messages posted on social media illustrated how politically polarized the country had become.